says, Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, Ani Yachid Ba'olami, V'hu Yachid Ba'olami.
An Adam. And who?
On Avram.
An Avram.
Avram, right. So we say, so there's a connection having to do with Yichud, B'chara. And is this Hamabas HaYichud? What is it?
The problem with you, Yitzchak, is that you know too much. Hello, Shmulik.
Good morning, Rabbi.
All right, so the question, I'm supposed to repeat the question, right? So the question is, what this was a medrash you were quoting? About
Gemara and Avei Pesach.
Gemara and Avei Pesach. I had a memory, I'd be dangerous. I don't remember the Gemara. Okay, so Rabbi Yitzchak says that the Gemara and Avei Pesach that says that when Avram Avinu needed to be rescued in the with this episode with Nimrod and or Kazdim, that Rebbeinu Shalom rejected the offer of Gabriel, was it, to go save him from the crucible of Nimrod, and that the argument was, or the Rebbeinu Shalom was saying that it's inappropriate for anyone other than himself, because Avram is a Yochid by Elamai and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a Yochid, so it's appropriate for a Yochid to take care of the Yochid. And the question is, why? What's the logic of that? Same thing is true of Mitzrayim, right? That in Mitzrayim, when Shalom said, "And Yivlei Malach and Yivlei Saraf," that he had to do it himself. So, B'derech Efsher, it seems to me that one of our challenges in the word Olam, which refers to our world, is conceals the word Helam. All right, so the reason that we call our world Olam, because it conceals the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu everywhere. So the Rebbeinu Shalom is Nelam b'teich Olamai. He's there, and every moment he sustains everything, but we don't see him. And it's that Helam which really ends up being, in a certain sense, the mission of Klal Yisrael, to reveal Hashem's presence everywhere. And we do so through Torah and mitzvahs, and through our Avodah. But invariably we get blindsided by the fact that it seems that nature does have kind of a velocity of its own to operate by physical principles that obscure the fact that the Rebbeinu Shalom is making these things happen. So from the earliest of times, the Rabbi Chanina ben Doises of the world saw everything as a miracle. They understood that it was no less of a miracle that oil should burn, and if the Rebbeinu Shalom wanted oil to burn, he could make vinegar burn, and that the two were equally miraculous. That there was nothing more compelling about the chemistry of Shem and the chometz, that they both were operating on a divine decree. So our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu becomes challenging, because we're always dealing with intervening variables. And in reality, the Klal Yisrael's relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Klal Yisrael's relationship with the purpose of creation, Klal Yisrael's relationship with Nitzchius, is all built on one very important fact, and that is that the only way anything happens is when we're in direct contact. We have to dispense with the illusions. Our obligation is that when we're learning Torah, that in every letter that we have a sense that the Rebbeinu Shalom is speaking to us through every letter. Every mitzvah that we do, we have a sense that the Rebbeinu Shalom is present in that mitzvah. And if we could extend that to everything else that's happening in our world, in the Ramah, in the first Halach in Shulchan Aruch says that we're supposed to consider ourselves as though we were constantly in the Chatzah, we're constantly in the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so that when a person talks in the presence of a king, he talks differently than if he was not in the presence of a king. So that just that mentality. So we have the saying that Kodesh B'lichu G'araisa V'Yisrael Chadu. Right, that Torah and Hashem and Klal Yisrael are one. But that oneness, really, what that oneness speaks to is that in order for us to be operating the way the Rebbeinu Shalom wants us to operate, is that we should not see Torah and ourselves and another Jew and a Kodesh Baruch Hu as separate. And that we need to understand that the Rebbeinu Shalom has invested of himself in us, and he's invested of himself in the next Jew sitting next to us. And as the Baal HaTanya says in his discussion of Ahavas Yisrael, that a person doesn't decide that because he stubbed his toe and it hurts him, that the answer to that is to amputate his toe. It's part of him. Baal HaTanya said that. Yeah, that when something is part of yourself, then your reaction to it is charitable. It's generous. It's inclusive. It's not exclusive. So, if we understood that all Klal Yisrael comes from the same source, and it's all a chelik elikah, it all has a divine origin, then we, even when we're disappointed in someone else, or even when someone else frustrates us or angers us, or even when someone is not conducting themselves appropriately, but they're us. Baal Shem HaKadosh said, Halavai, I would love the greatest tzaddik like the Rebbeinu Shalom loves the greatest rasha. It's a powerful statement. Halavai, I would love the greatest tzaddik like the Rebbeinu Shalom loves the greatest rasha. It's all, we're all drawn from the same source. The point over here really is that you don't criticize a plant. You don't think a plant is weak, because when you put it down someplace in your house and you discover that it's bending its branches and its leaves towards the sunlight, you say, oh, well, that's a crutch. It's a crutch. It's reaching out to the sun. It's a sign of weakness. That's the source of life. And the only time that we are truly alive and truly healthy, and when we are who we're supposed to be, is when we're connected like HaKadosh Baruch Hu, directly. There's no intervening variables. We're connected directly. But being connected directly is not because the Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't see it that way. It's because we fail to see it that way. The Rebbeinu Shalom is connected to us directly. But if we don't see it, then it's not flowing. If we don't operate by that principle, then it's the arteries. We're obstructing the arteries. We're the ones who are slowing the divine connection, because we're placing all kinds of plaque into the flow of divine energy. So when we say a person is free, right? You heard this from me before. I said this here earlier, but there's there was an Indian poet by the name of Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore. So he said the following thing. He said, I have before me a violin string.
Sorry?
I have before me a violin string. He said, I twist it, it's free to move in any direction, but it's not free to sing. He said, I take it and I fix it to my violin. It is no longer free to move, but it is for the first time free to sing. The Jewish definition of freedom is not chaos. It's not the freedom to move in any direction. It's when a Jewish neshama is bound to Torah. It's not free to move freely as it was before, but it liberates the song in us. It's for the first time free to sing. So the Jewish definition of freedom is when we're connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's when we are free, because that's when our essence, our integrity is that's when we're connected to the source. And we're connected to the source, then we are fully who we're supposed to be. So, Rabbi Michel says in Derech Hashem, he talks about the fact that Rabbi Michel, when he created the world, he established certain timelines, and at the conclusion of the first 2 millennia was when the Rabbi Michel said, okay, now I'm going to look at the world and see who is going to be worthy of representing the Tachlis Habriya. And when you looked at the world at the end of 2 millennia, there was one person, and that was Avraham Avinu, who was worthy of that distinction. So Avraham Avinu became the individual who was going to be the beginning of the bearer of the Tachlis Habriya. It could have been Adam Marishan, but it turned out it wasn't Adam Marishan, so it had to be Avraham Avinu. So now Avraham Avinu he's at this watershed moment in his life, right? So he's and it's interesting because there is really a taina on Avraham Avinu. Kiddush Hashem is a mitzvah after Matan Torah. For an individual before Matan Torah to surrender their lives al Kiddush Hashem was really something that was prohibited from the standpoint of suicide. So the fact that Avraham Avinu, in a certain sense, made the following statement. Nimrod wants me to deny Kodesh Baruch Hu. I'm not going to deny Kodesh Baruch Hu. Not only am I not going to deny Kodesh Baruch Hu by surrendering my life, I'm prepared to surrender my nitzchus, my olam haba, because I'm going to do something now which is not according to the Shabbat mitzvahs v'nei noach. According to Shabbat mitzvahs, I'm not allowed to do this. But I refuse to compromise my bakosha emes, my chetzom emes, to the point where I'm prepared to give away my olam haba. That was what defined Avraham Avinu as the legitimate bearer, someone who was willing to give away his nitzchius for the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for that statement. That was the choice. So in a certain sense, Avraham Avinu was a yachid in that absolute commitment to emes. So now, the agent that has to sustain Avraham Avinu. So if it's done through something which is other than directly with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, That means that the cherus of Avram Avinu, or his entire existence, his whole mahus, comes from something other than that direct connection. And it's a defining moment, because his being given life needs to come at that moment because that's now what defines his mahus, is who's saving him. When someone says, I have to save him. Because Avram Avinu and everything that Avram Avinu represents, and the fact that there's going to be a Klal Yisrael, that existence needs to be one which is defined not by anything that is intervening. It has to be defined by the fact that I myself am the responsible party, because then that means that the life of Avraham Avinu, the life of Klal Yisrael, comes from that direct intervention, and that's the source of everything that we are. So Avraham Avinu represents, in a certain sense, that conduit, which is the Nikuda Pnimius of Klal Yisrael, and that Nikuda Pnimius had to happen through nothing other than that the Yachid. He's a Yachid, but we're part of that Yachid. And if we were to come into being in anything other than without that direct connection with the Yachidus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that would have been a predicate in who we are. And the only reason that we are is because we're bound to HaKadosh Baruch Hu directly. And for that same reason, the Rebbeinu Shalom had to be the agent to take Klal Yisrael out of Avdus. The reason that we are not Avodim is because Shtoli Kaidim, like the Chazal say. You're not Avodim Lavodim, Avodai Haim. That definition of Avodai Haim had to come directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. No intervening force. And it really goes back to, Rashi quotes Chazal, and that in the first day of the Bria, it doesn't say Vayeru Yom Rishon, it says Yom Echad. So Rashi quotes Chazal that the reason it says Yom Echad is because on the first day there was nothing other than it. It was all Achdus. There was nothing other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So even though there was Shemayim v'Aretz and everything, there was Esa Shemayim v'Esa Aretz, and everything was inclusive already in that Bria, but it was all in a state of Yom Echad. And that Yom Echad is really kind of where the whole Bria is going to. That's really what the Rebbeinu Shalom wants the Bria to look like. It wants the Bria to look like a seamless connection with himself, where there's nothing, even in that chelik of the Bria, which is, in a certain sense, distinct of him, that it's not distinct, that it's all connected. So I can't say Yom Rishon, because the Rishon implies there's a Sheni and a Shlishi and so on. Yom Echad, it's all. Balatanya says someplace, why don't we say Shema Yisrael Shem Elokeinu Shem Echad? We should say Hashem Yachid. That's really what we're trying to say, that he's a Yachid B'Olamim. So we should say Hashem, Shema Yisrael Shem Elokeinu Hashem Yachid. He's the only one. So he says that the term Yachid allows for separation. Yachid.
Which Yachid or Echad?
Huh? Yachid. Yachid allows for separation. Yachid means it.
As opposed to something else.
As opposed to something else. Whereas Echad is something that implies connection. So he said, we say Hashem Echad because we're trying to say that Hashem, he is Echad Yochid and Yuchad. He is a Yochid, but he's not a Yochid in being separated from Hashem. He's from the world. He's an Echad. He's a Yochid Echad. He's the kind of Yochid which is one which is connected to the entire Bria. The entire Bria is really everything is an expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it has to be Echad, not Yochid, because if it said Yochid, it would imply that we're in two different places. So I think that this thing, independent of the issues of Tumah and so on, and Malach and so on, but these are defining moments. This is when we became a nation. This is when Avraham Avinu became the Av. This is the time when we became an Am. So those are times when it has to be that there's nothing in between.
So there's a shift from teaching Mitzrayim to defining us.
Right. The Chazal say that there are three maftechos which the Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't give over to any shliach. One is rain, and one is birth, and one is tchias hamesim. They bring the pasuk for each one. So there's a beautiful vote from the Goyim. In the Goyim it says by the tzitz, Pituche Chaysam, Kodesh Lashem. That's the tzitz has to be. Let me get this in Parshas Tzav, I think it is. Vasisa tzitza of Torah v'yitach alav pituche chaysam kodesh l'Hashem. So the Goyin says that the word chaysam represents, the ches represents chaya, which is a midwife delivering babies. The tuf represents tchiyah, and the mem represents motor. So he says, Pituche, the keys to Chaysam, which are Chaya, Techiyah, and Motor, are Kodesh Lashem. Those things are exclusively into it. So,
I'm just wondering if there's a connection there to the idea of a signature, chasima. When you say chaysam over there, the lashon is
Chaysam is
right?
I think that it's like a signet ring. When you they used to have a signet ring, so it's a chaysam. So you engrave it inside, and then when you put it on the wax, it comes out of chaysam. So that's I suggested many years ago that all of our ability to grow in ruchnius has this. There's a certain pattern built into the way in which we grow in ruchnius. So what happens is that a person has a sense of how they should move forward. So, and any kind of meaningful growth requires changes. So you gotta make room for change in your life. You want to learn more. You want to daven better. You want to be nicer to people. You want to, whatever it is, whether it's minod ma'amokim, minod ma'chavere. So it doesn't happen without making changes. You want to be nice. You want to take care of your temper. And so you're gonna learn some sforim that help you with, or maybe you'll go to somebody, to a therapist. You go to Yitzchak or to Avram, and you tell them I have an anger problem. By Chassidim, anger was, by the tzaddikim, anger was really. They told over, I think, on Rabbi Michel, that there was a chassid who he was very upset with. So he called him in and he chewed him out. Said to him, you gotta change. You can't do this anymore. Anyway, so he found out later on that the chassid was still continuing in his errant ways. So he called him in again and he gave him some more musar. Discovered that he still wasn't. So he called him in a third time. He said to him, listen, I'm warning you now. If you continue to do this, I'm going to get angry at you. So in most cases, the Chassidim were terrified. They're going to get angry. The Rebbe's going to get angry. And this Rabbi Tzchul was a Oyev Yisrael, like off the charts. So found out that he was still doing it. So he called him in. And the Rebbe said to his Gabba, okay, give me the rekel that I wear when I get angry. So he gave him the rekel. He said, okay, now give me the hat that I wear when I get angry. I gave him the hat that I wear. He said, now give me the cane that I wear, that I hold when I get angry. So this chassid is like, oh boy, this is really coming down, This is going to be thunder and lightning bolts over here, and he's like trembling. And the Rebbe's standing there, and he says to the guy, okay, now get angry at him. In order for us to grow in any meaningful way, you have to make room. And room, it's time, it's support, it's energy, it's all kinds of stuff. And so if you want to do it right, it requires a lot of thought, a lot of preparation. So, but almost by definition, if it's a ruchnistic thing, and we're trying to advance ruchnius in a gashmistic world, so there's a little bit of by definition there's a stira here. There's a contradiction, because we're trying to introduce ruchnius into the gashmistic world. So the only way that's going to happen is if we are mispahal to Hashem. We say, Rabbi Shalom, this is really important to me. I want to daven better. I want to learn better. I want to be nicer to my wife. I want to be nicer to my children. I want to be nicer to my chaverim, whatever it is. So, some people need help being charitable. There are people of great means, and they're unable to let go of their millions to help people who are less fortunate. It's a sickness. So you've got to be mispahal. Shalom, help me with this. So that's one phase of growth. The second phase of growth is that invariably anything that's good is going to be challenged. The Baldova, the Yitzhahara, the Satan, whatever you want to, who Malach HaMovis, who Satan, or Yitzhahara, is gonna test you. You make a resolve that you're not going to read a newspaper on Shabbos. The next Shabbos, you can be pretty sure some great, very fascinating event is going to happen, and you're going to want to read about it on Shabbos. The point that I'm trying to make is that if you make a serious commitment, the dark side, as is it Star Wars?
Yeah.
Who's the dark side?
Star Wars.
The Empire. Huh?
Star Wars. Star Wars Empire Strikes Back, right?
Huh?
It's all the same thing.
Darth
Star Wars
Vader.
Empire
The dark
Strikes
side.
Back,
So
Return of the Jedi.
Huh?
Darth Vader.
Right, so Darth Vader is going to come along and is going to try to test your resolve, and it's very hard because it's I've had situations with people that we worked with, and then they finally decided they're going to become Shem Shabbos, and the first thing that came along was my cousin, who were the closest, and he's making something on Shabbos, and it's at the ballpark. Huh?
Superdog.
Huh?
Superdog.
Superdog. That's right, Superdog. I told the story about Superdog. It's a great story. It was in Chicago. There's a he's left Chicago now, but there was a Rum Mordechai Alter. He was a Kiruv worker. So he told over that there was a guy who he'd been working with. When the guy came to Shiur all the time, and he was like in the process of trying. So one day he comes in and he's like livid, and he says, "Why is this happening to me?" So he said to him, "What's going on?" He said, one of my most favorite things in the world is that this Superdog hot dogs. There's a place in Chicago. There are a bunch of stores called Superdog. He said, I love Superdogs. He said, I look forward to that. He said, and I realized finally I can't do this anymore. So I finally decided I'm going to stop eating treif. I'm going to stop eating Superdogs. So he said, but I decided I have to have one last one. One last one before I give it up. He said, I'm resolved not doing it. So he said, so I went in. He said, and I bought a Superdog. Huh?
He did it without a broch.
I don't know. With a broch. So he says, and I'm sitting there eating my Superdog, and an elderly man comes in, like very dressed, very casually. And he sits down at another table, and then he comes over to me, and we get to talk. And he sees that I'm kind of like upset, so we get to talk, and I tell him, this is my last Superdog. So the guy says to me, why is this your last Superdog? So I don't want, I'm going to go tell him a cheshbon with kosher and this things. I don't know if he was Jewish, not Jewish. So I said to him, well, I'm retired now, and I'm on Social Security, and I have to begin to watch my spending. So I decided this is a bit of a... So he said, so the guy gets up and goes over to the counter and gets a piece of paper, and he writes something on a piece of paper. And as I'm getting up to leave, he hands me this piece of paper, and he says to me, my name is something Becker. I'm the owner of all the Superdogs. He said, nobody should have to stop eating Superdogs because they don't have enough money. You take this piece of paper, and whenever you want, you can go into any of my stores. They will give you all the Superdogs you want for free. So he comes in, and he's raging. Why is this happening to me? It's a great story, the Superdog story. But the
God has a sense of humor.
Huh?
God has a great sense of humor.
Yeah, but the Superdog is really something that happens to virtually anybody whether he's about tshuva or he's a FFB, and he wants to move forward, and he resolves something, that he's going to do something to move him into this new place, the Baldova will invariably, and it doesn't take very long, and he'll test us. The only way to survive that test is to be mispelled HaKadosh Baruch Hu and say, Rabbi Michel, I really want to do this. Don't let me falter over here. There's a third phase. The third phase is when sooner or later, and maybe 2 years later, maybe 3 years later, something happens and you fail. Your resolve. You promised yourself you weren't going to look at this magazine anymore, whatever it is. And you stumbled, you fell. You weren't going to do the Machal Shabbos in a certain way, you weren't going to read the new print, whatever. The gazillion things that can take us. What happens then is that there's a little voice inside of us that says, you see, I told you. I told you can't do this. I told you were too ambitious. I told you they were being, you were trying to be something that you're not. This is not really you. And it's a very powerful, very powerful voice, because it does kind of feed into our maybe I really was trying to be something that I'm not supposed to be. So it's another time you got to be Mitzvah Ben Shalom. Don't let me fall into this pit. I really want to stay the course. So I think that when Chazal said that there are these three keys that belong to the Ben Shalom, was telling us that one is by birth. That's when we first make a resolution that we want to change something, and we want to give birth to a new person. We want to give birth to a new kind of a better person. And the only way to do that is to be mispalo, because there'll be a lot of voices that'll tell us that, leave it alone. You're okay where you are. Don't try to be something you're not. Call on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that you should be able to get started. The second time is when we get that test. So that's when the seed in the ground wants to grow. You need some rain. So, I'm the seed. I want to grow. I'm being tested now. So that's the second. The third key is when we failed, when we, in a certain sense, we experience a death. And we call on Ben Shalom, don't let me end up this way. Resurrect me so I can keep those three keys are on the hands of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Earth and rain and resurrection. And they're all part of every single cycle of growth. Because anytime we want to move forward, we need a direct connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it's not just a Mitzrayim, it's not just Avraham Avinu. It's any time that we need to be redeemed, whether it's from Nimrod's fire or it's Paro's bondage, it's Anivlei Malach, Anivlei so. It's not, the Rebbeinu Shalom does not give over that maftech to anybody. It's him and us.
What's the superdose story you told us?